If you are new here, my name is Garrison Caldwell. I spent 40 years as a structural engineer. I built bridges that can withstand hurricanes and skyscrapers that do not sway in the wind. My job was to find the cracks before the whole thing came crashing down. But the biggest crack I ever found was not in concrete or steel. It was in my own bloodline. Before I tell you how I brought my brother to his knees without throwing a single punch, please hit that like button. It helps this old man share his truth. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a family member lie to your face when they did not know you held all the cards? The phone rang at exactly 6 a.m. The sun was not even up over the horizon yet. The ringtone shattered the silence of my morning routine. I am a man of habit. Coffee black. Toast burnt. Silence. That is how I like it. When I saw the name Leonard on the caller ID, my stomach tightened. We had not spoken in 3 years. Not since he told me I was too toxic to be around Mom. Leonard is 6 years younger than me, but he has always acted like the spoiled baby of the family. He never held a job for more than 6 months. He always had a scheme, a big idea, a new investment that could not fail. And every time it failed, he went running to Mom. I swiped answer and put the phone to my ear. I did not say hello, I just listened. Gary, is that you? His voice was a performance. It was thick, wet, trembling. If I did not know him better, I might have felt a pang of sympathy. But I know Leonard. I know that specific tone. That is the tone he uses when he needs money, or when he is trying to hide something. Leonard, I said. My voice was gravel. It was early. What do you want? He let out a long, shuddering breath. It sounded like he was standing in a wind tunnel. It is Mom, Gary. Oh God, it is Mom. She is gone. I stood perfectly still. My hand froze halfway to my coffee mug. For a second, the engineer in my brain tried to calculate the load of those words. Gone. Dead. The end of the structure. What happened, I asked. I kept my voice flat. It was last night, he sobbed. A stroke. Massive. It happened so fast, Gary. I was with her. I held her hand. She was in so much pain, but then she just slipped away. The paramedics said there was nothing they could do. He paused for effect. I could hear him blowing his nose. I am so sorry, Gary. I know you two were not close at the end. I know you abandoned us. But she loved you, even after you left. I felt the anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. Abandoned, I sent checks every month. $4,000. Every single month for 20 years. That money paid for the roof over their heads. That money paid for the car Leonard drove. That money paid for the nursing aides Leonard fired because he said he could do it better. I did not say any of that. I just let him talk. I needed to see how far the crack went. When is the funeral, I asked. Friday, Leonard said quickly. Too quickly. Today was Wednesday. That was less than 48 hours away. Friday. Why the rush, Leonard? It is what the coroner recommended, he stammered. Because of the state of the body and Mom. Mom always wanted it quick. No fuss, just family. He took a breath and then his voice changed. The grief evaporated, replaced by something cold and hard. Listen, Gary. There is something else we need to discuss. I do not want to do this now, but time is tight. Mom did not leave a will, not a new one. But under Ohio state law, since I was her primary caregiver, and since I lived in the house with her for the last decade, the estate transfers to me. The house, the savings, the insurance, all of it. I leaned against the kitchen counter. I looked at the granite surface. Smooth, polished, cold. Is that so? I asked. Yes, he said. And honestly, Gary, it is only fair. I was the one changing her diapers. I was the one feeding her. You were, wherever you were. You get nothing. And frankly, you deserve nothing. I am doing you a favor by even calling you. You do not even need to come down here. I can handle the arrangements. I will send you the ashes later. I closed my eyes. I could picture him, standing in the hallway of our childhood home, probably wearing that silk robe he bought with my money, thinking he had won, thinking he was the smartest man in the room. He thought he was talking to a senile old man. He thought I was weak. But Leonard forgot one thing. I checked the foundations. I always check the foundations. You are right, Leonard, I said softly. You did so much. You sacrificed your life for her. I did, he said, his voice swelling with pride. I really did. And she died last night in her bed. Yes. Right here. In the master bedroom. It was peaceful in the end. I slowly opened my eyes and looked across the kitchen island. Sitting there in her favorite floral armchair that I had moved from the living room was a 94-year-old woman. She had silver hair that was perfectly brushed. She was wearing a soft blue cardigan. Her hands shook a little as she lifted a china teacup to her lips. She took a sip, set it down, and looked at me with clear, sharp eyes. Then she pointed at the TV screen where the morning news was playing and shook her head at the weatherman. My mother. Evelyn Caldwell. Alive. Breathing. Drinking Earl Grey tea. The woman Leonard said was dead. The woman he said he held while she took her last breath. A cold smile spread across my face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who just found the structural failure that would bring the whole building down. Leonard had not just lied. He had committed a crime. He had declared a living woman dead. And if he was rushing a funeral for Friday, that meant he needed a death certificate fast. Why? Why would my brother, a coward by nature, take such a massive, dangerous risk, Gary? Are you still there? Leonard asked. He sounded nervous now. I am here, Leonard, I said. I looked at Mom. She smiled at me, innocent and unaware that her youngest son had just buried her in a shallow grave of lies. I took a sip of my black coffee. It was bitter. Just the way I like it. I understand, Leonard, I said. You are right. You deserve everything. The house, the money, all of it. I could hear him exhale. The relief was palpable through the phone line. Thank you, Gary. I knew you would be reasonable. So, you will stay in New York, then I will mail you the papers to sign. No, I said. The line went silent. No, I am coming home, Leonard. But, why, he stammered. There is no point. It is just a cremation. It will be over in 20 minutes. You hate travel. You are old. I am 72, Leonard. Not dead. And a son should be there for his mother's funeral, even if he gets nothing. I walked over to Mom and placed my hand gently on her shoulder. She patted my hand. Her skin was warm. Very warm for a corpse. I will see you Friday, Leonard. Do not start without me. I hung up the phone before he could argue. I looked down at Mom. Who was that, dear? She asked. Her voice was frail, but it was there. That was Leonard, Mom, I said. Oh, she frowned. Is he asking for money again? I laughed. A dry, harsh sound. Something like that, Mom. Something like that. I went to the hallway closet and pulled down my old leather suitcase. I dusted it off. I had not used it in years. I packed 3 black suits. I packed my polished dress shoes. And then from the safe in the back of the closet, I took out a file folder. Inside were bank statements, property deeds, and a power of attorney document signed 3 years ago. Leonard thought he was the player. He thought he was the house. But he did not know I had already rigged the game. I was going to Ohio. I was going to attend a funeral, but it was not going to be my mother's. If Leonard wanted a tragedy, I would give him one. But I was the engineer, and I was about to bring his whole world crashing down. I pulled the zipper of my suitcase closed. It made a sharp, rasping sound that cut through the quiet hum of the apartment. On the sofa, Mom was humming a tune I did not recognize. She was watching a commercial for dog food on the television. She pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "Look, Gary. That looks just like Buster." She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Buster was the golden retriever we had when I was in high school. He had been dead for 30 years. I smiled back at her as I folded a crisp white shirt. "It does, Mom. It looks just like him." She went back to sipping her tea, content in her own world. Watching her sit there safe and warm in her blue cardigan, you would never guess the hell she had been through just 3 days ago. You would never guess that 72 hours ago, this woman who raised 2 sons and taught Sunday school for 40 years was known only as Jane Doe No. 4 at a state shelter 200 miles from her home. My hands shook slightly as I smoothed the fabric of my suit. The rage was still there, sitting heavy in my chest, like a block of concrete. I remembered the call from the social worker on Tuesday. She had sounded tired. She asked if I was Garrison Caldwell. She said they had found an elderly woman wandering near a highway rest stop in West Virginia. No ID, no purse, just a confused old woman wearing a nightgown and one slipper. She could not remember her name, but she kept repeating my name. Garrison. Garrison. I drove 6 hours that night. I broke every speed limit on the interstate. When I walked into that shelter, the smell of bleach and unwashed bodies hit me like a wall. And there she was, sitting on a metal cot wrapped in a coarse gray blanket. She looked so small. She looked discarded. Like a piece of furniture someone had left on the curb because it took up too much space. The nurse told me they found her dehydrated and sunburned. I knew instantly who had done this. Leonard. My brother did not just kick her out. He drove her across state lines. He drove her far enough away that he thought she would never find her way back. He dumped her like an unwanted stray dog and then drove home to sleep in her bed. He probably thought she would die out there. Or maybe he just thought she would get lost in the system, another anonymous tragedy that no one would investigate. He erased her identity so he could steal her life. I looked at Mom again. She was safe now. But the image of her in that shelter shivering and calling my name burned in my mind. It was the fuel that would power everything I was about to do. I was not just going to the funeral to expose a liar. I was going to destroy a monster. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the marble. I knew who it was before I even looked. Leonard. He was getting impatient. I picked it up. "Gary," he said. He sounded out of breath like he had been running. "I am packing, Leonard. I told you I am coming." "Yeah, that is great," he said, but his voice was tight. "Listen, I just sent you an email. It is a link to a digital document service. I need you to open it and electronically sign the waiver, right now, before you get on the plane." I frowned, holding the phone away from my ear for a second. The desperation in his voice was thick enough to choke on. "Why the rush, Leonard?" I asked. "I am catching a flight in 3 hours. I can sign everything when I land. We can do it over dinner." "No," he snapped. Then he caught himself and lowered his voice, trying to sound reasonable. "I mean, we can't wait. The funeral home is giving me a hard time. The medical examiner needs the release forms signed by all next of kin before they can process Mom. It is a health code thing, because she passed at home. They cannot embalm her or even dress her until the legal status is clear. Do you want Mom lying on a metal table in a body bag for 2 more days?" I gripped the phone tighter. The lie was disgusting. He was using the image of our dead mother's body to manipulate me. He was banking on my guilt. He thought I would be so horrified by the idea of Mom being mistreated that I would sign anything just to give her dignity. That sounds unusual, Leonard, I said calmly. I have handled estates before. I have never heard of a coroner needing a property waiver to process a body. It is a new law, he said quickly. A county ordinance. Look, Gary, do not be difficult. Just click the link. It takes 5 seconds. Do it for Mom, please. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city skyline. I could see the reflection of Mom in the glass behind me. She was trying to get the last drop of tea out of her cup. I am looking at the email now, I lied. Good, Leonard said. Just scroll to the bottom. Click the box that says you waive all claims to the estate and authorize me as the sole executor. Once you click that, they can start preparing her for the viewing. He was sweating. I could hear it. He was terrified that if I showed up in person, I might ask to see the body. Or worse, I might talk to the neighbors. He needed that legal title transferring the house to him before I set foot in Ohio. Once he had the deed, he could sell the house or borrow against it immediately. He probably had a loan shark breathing down his neck right this second. I am having trouble with the link, Leonard, I said. My internet is acting up. Try it again, he urged. Refresh the page. Use your data. I did not touch the screen. I just let the silence stretch out. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in. It is not working, Leonard. It says the server is down. Damn it, he hissed. I heard something shatter in the background, like he had thrown a glass against the wall. What was that noise? I asked innocently. Nothing, he said. Just dropped a plate. I am stressed, Gary. I have not slept. I am grieving alone here. I know, I said. It must be hard. Being there in that big house all by yourself. It is, he said. It is empty without her. I felt a surge of nausea. The man had no soul. Look, Leonard, I said firmly. I am leaving for the airport in 20 minutes. I will be there by tonight. Bring the papers to the hotel. I will sign them with a pen the old-fashioned way. We can have a drink. Brother to brother. There was a long pause. I could hear his heavy breathing. He was calculating the risks. He realized he had no choice. If he pushed too hard, I might get suspicious. He had to play the grieving, accommodating brother. Fine, he spat out. But do not blame me if the viewing is delayed. Do not blame me if Mom looks not like herself. I will not blame you, Leonard, I said. I know exactly who is responsible. I will see you tonight, he said, and hung up. I lowered the phone and looked at the black screen. You have no idea, Leonard. You have absolutely no idea what is coming for you. I turned back to Mom. She was looking at me with a confused expression. Was that Leonard? She asked again. Yes, Mom, I said softly. He is a bad boy, she whispered. She looked down at her hands. He took me for a drive. He said we were going for ice cream, but we drove for a long time. And then he told me to get out and look at the flowers. And he drove away. I walked over and knelt beside her chair. I took her fragile hands in mine. Her skin was paper thin. I know, Mom. I know. But he can never hurt you again. She looked at me, her eyes suddenly clear and sharp, the fog lifting for a brief second. Make him pay, Gary, she said. I squeezed her hands. I promise, Mom. I am going to take everything from him. I stood up and closed the suitcase. The latch clicked shut with a sound like a gun being cocked. I put on my suit jacket and checked my reflection in the mirror. I did not look like a retired engineer. I looked like a man going to war. I grabbed my keys and the folder of evidence. Come on, Mom, I said. Let's go get some ice cream. And then we are going to crash a funeral. She smiled, the fear gone from her face. I like strawberry, she said. I picked up my suitcase and opened the door. The game had begun, and Leonard was already losing, he just did not know it yet. I checked Mom into the Grandview Hotel suite. It was the kind of place Leonard would have killed to stay in, with marble floors and room service that cost more than his car payment. I made sure the private nurse was settled in a sturdy woman named Brenda, who I had hired through an agency on the drive down. I told Brenda that under no circumstances was anyone to enter that room. Not housekeeping, not management, and certainly not any family members. She looked at the grim expression on my face and simply nodded. She knew a security detail when she saw one. Once Mom was safe watching her favorite game show and eating a club sandwich, I walked out to the rental car. The sun was starting to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the parking lot. It was time to go home. The drive to the old neighborhood felt like navigating a minefield of memories. Every corner held a ghost. The park where Dad taught me to throw a baseball. The diner where Leonard used to steal tips off the tables until I caught him. But as I turned onto Elm Street, the nostalgia evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot in my stomach. The house was a Victorian classic, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch that my father had spent 20 years restoring. He used to say the house was the 4th member of our family. He treated the wood and brick with more respect than Leonard ever treated anything in his life. I pulled up to the curb and killed the engine. The silence inside the car was deafening, but outside it was a circus. The lawn, usually manicured to perfection, was trampled. There were no black wreaths on the door. There were no signs of mourning. Instead, there were bright orange stickers on the windows. Construction permits. And right in the center of the yard, hammered aggressively into the soft earth, was a sign that made my blood run cold. Coming soon, prime real estate. But that was not the worst part. To the left of the driveway, piled up like refuse from a demolition site, was a mountain of black garbage bags and cardboard boxes. I stepped out of the car, my dress shoes crunching on the gravel. I walked toward the pile, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached out and pulled open the top flap of a box. Inside were Mom's cookbooks, the ones with the spines broken from years of use, the ones with her handwritten notes in the margins. Next to the box was a clear plastic bag stuffed with her quilts. The quilts she had hand-stitched for Leonard when he was sick as a child. They were thrown there, just thrown there to rot in the evening dew. Well, look who finally decided to show up. The voice was shrill, cutting through the evening air like a rusty saw. I looked up toward the porch. Standing there, holding a clipboard and a glass of white wine, was Beatrice, my sister-in-law. She was wearing a tight pink tracksuit that looked ridiculous on a woman of her age, and her hair was dyed a shade of blonde that did not exist in nature. She didn't look like a woman who had just lost her mother-in-law. She looked like a woman who had just won the lottery. "Hello, Beatrice," I said. My voice was steady. "I am here to see Leonard." She laughed, a harsh barking sound. She took a sip of her wine and walked down the steps, blocking my path to the front door. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my suit, assessing its cost. "Leonard is busy," she sneered. "He is inside meeting with the contractors. We have a lot of work to do to get this dusty old museum ready for the market. Not that you would care. You only show up when you smell money, don't you, Gary?" I looked past her at the open front door. I could hear music playing inside. Upbeat pop music. Not exactly a funeral dirge. I came for the funeral, Beatrice, and to pay my respects to Mom. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Save the act for the neighbors, Gary. We all know why you are really here. You heard the house was going to Leonard, and you came running back to see if you could get a piece of the pie. Well, I have news for you. You are too late. The waiver is as good as signed, and Leonard is the sole owner. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the cheap Chardonnay on her breath. "We are not keeping any of this junk," she said, gesturing vaguely at the house. "We are selling it all. The furniture, the dishes, everything. We are moving to Florida, Gary. Boca Raton. We put the deposit down on a villa this morning. Oceanfront. Gated community. No more winters. No more changing diapers for a senile old woman. We are finally going to live the life we deserve. I looked at the pile of trash again. So you are throwing her things away before she is even buried? Beatrice shrugged. Why wait? It is just clutter. Leonard wants a fresh start. And frankly, having all this old crap around is depressing. We need to stage the house for the open house next week. We are listing it for $2.5 million. The market is hot. $2.5 million. That was the number. That was the price tag they had put on my mother's life. They had stripped her of her dignity, dumped her in a shelter, and declared her dead, all for a condo in Boca Raton. I looked Beatrice in the eye. You seem very confident, Beatrice. I am, she smirked. Because I know how this works. Leonard has the power of attorney. He has the deed. And you have nothing. You are just a bitter old man who lives alone. So why don't you get back in your little rental car and drive back to the airport? We don't want you here. You bring down the property value. She turned her back on me and started walking back up the stairs, her hips swaying with exaggerated arrogance. I did not follow her. Not yet. I looked down at the grass near my feet. Something caught my eye. Half buried under a bag of old clothes was a picture frame. The glass was cracked. I bent down and picked it up, brushing off the dirt. It was a photo from 30 years ago. It was taken on this very porch. Mom was sitting in the middle, smiling that warm, gentle smile. Dad was standing behind her. I was on the left, looking serious even then. And Leonard was on the right, laughing. We looked like a family. Beatrice stopped at the top of the stairs and looked back down at me. Put that down, she yelled. I told the movers to clear the yard. That is trash. Leave it where it belongs. I looked at the crack running through Mom's face in the photo. I ran my thumb over the fractured glass. It belongs to me now, Beatrice, I said quietly. She scoffed. Take it. It is worthless anyway. Just like your claim to this house. She slammed the front door shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot across the quiet street. I stood there for a long moment holding the broken picture. The wind picked up, rustling the plastic bags filled with my mother's life. I looked at the house. I looked at the structural beams I knew were behind those walls. I knew exactly where the load-bearing walls were. I knew exactly where the weak points were. Beatrice and Leonard thought they were building a new life on a foundation of money. They didn't realize they were standing on a sinkhole. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the trash pile. I took a picture of the construction permit. I took a picture of the coming soon sign. Then I carefully placed the photo of Mom inside my jacket pocket, right next to my heart. Enjoy the villa in Florida. Beatrice, I whispered to the closed door, because by the time I am done with you, you won't even be able to afford a tent. I turned around and walked back to the car. I did not look back. I had seen enough. The reconnaissance was over. It was time to start the demolition. I walked up the porch steps of the house that my father had built with his own 2 hands. The wood groaned under my weight, a sound I had known since childhood, but tonight it sounded like a warning. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into the foyer. Immediately, the air inside assaulted me. It did not smell like lavender and old books, which was the scent of my mother. It smelled of stale beer takeout pizza and something far more offensive, cigarette smoke, thick, heavy, ingrained in the curtains and the carpet. My mother had severe asthma. For 40 years, no one was allowed to smoke within 100 feet of this house. Dad had quit cold turkey the day she was diagnosed. Seeing an ashtray overflowing with butts right there on the hallway table told me everything I needed to know about how Leonard had been caring for her. He had turned her sanctuary into a dive bar. Leonard appeared from the kitchen. He was wearing a rumpled dress shirt with sweat stains under the arms. His eyes were darting around bloodshot and wide. He looked like a man who had been awake for days, fueled by caffeine and panic. When he saw me, he flinched, as if he expected me to hit him. "Gary," he breathed out. "You are here." "I am here, Leonard," I said, keeping my voice low and devoid of emotion. I walked past him into the living room. It was a disaster zone. The antique coffee table was covered in rings from wet glasses. There were decks of cards scattered on the floor and a half-empty bottle of bourbon sitting on the mantel next to Dad's urn. It looked like a poker game had ended in a hurry. "Where is she?" I asked. Leonard rushed in front of me, cutting off my path to the hallway that led to the master bedroom. "She is in her room," he said quickly. "But you cannot go in there." I stopped and looked him in the eye. He was trembling. Not with sorrow, but with the jittery energy of a liar who is losing control of the narrative. "She is my mother, Leonard," I said. "I flew 500 miles to say goodbye. I want to see her." "No," he said, holding up his hands. "Gary, listen to me. You do not want to see her. Not like this." "Why?" I asked, taking a slow step forward. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "It was the fall," he stammered. "When she had the stroke, she fell. She hit her face on the corner of the nightstand. It is bad, Gary. It is really bad. Her face, it is disfigured. There is a lot of bruising, swelling. The doctor said it would be traumatizing for you to see her. He recommended a closed casket for a reason." I stared at him. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. He was not just killing her off. He was mutilating her memory to cover his tracks. He was inventing horrific injuries for a woman who was currently sitting in a hotel room watching Jeopardy and eating a club sandwich. I felt a surge of violence rise in my gut, a primal urge to grab him by the throat and drag him to the hotel to show him his own mother. But I pushed it down. I needed him to think I was weak. I needed him to think I was the same passive older brother he had always manipulated. I looked down at the floor, feigning shock. "Is it that bad?" I whispered. "It is worse," Leonard said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He thought he had hooked me. "Trust me, Gary. Remember her how she was. Do not let that be the last image you have of her." I closed the door and turned off the AC so the smell wouldn't, you know. He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. He was a monster. A true, irredeemable monster. I let out a long, shaky sigh and rubbed my eyes. "Okay," I said. "Okay, Leonard. If you say so." I walked over to the sofa and sat down heavily. The cushions smelled like cheap cologne. "I just need a minute," I said. "I feel a bit lightheaded." Leonard relaxed visibly. His shoulders dropped 3 inches. He thought he had won. He thought the crisis was averted. "Yeah, of course," he said, moving toward the kitchen. "Can I get you a drink? Water, or maybe something stronger?" "Water is fine," I said. As soon as he turned the corner into the kitchen, I moved. I did not move like an old man. I moved with the precision of an engineer who has a job to do. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small black device. It was a high-powered audio transmitter, no bigger than a quarter. I had bought it from a private security firm in New York years ago for a site inspection, and it had been sitting in my desk drawer ever since. I leaned forward and felt under the lip of the heavy oak coffee table. My fingers found a rough patch of wood. I peeled the backing off the adhesive and pressed the device firmly against the underside of the table. It was invisible unless you were lying on the floor. I sat back up and smoothed my tie just as Leonard walked back in with a glass of tap water. The glass was dirty. There was a smudge of lipstick on the rim. Beatrice's, no doubt. "Here," he said, handing it to me. I took the glass but did not drink. I looked around the room again. "You have changed things around," I observed. Leonard looked nervous again. He started gathering the decks of cards from the floor, shoving them into his pockets. "Yeah, well, Mom needed more space," he said. "For the wheelchair. And the hospital bed." I looked at the rug. There were cigarette burns on it. And the smoking, I asked. "Mom let you smoke inside." He froze for a second, then shrugged. "Towards the end, she didn't know where she was, Gary. She didn't care. It helped me cope. The stress, it was a lot." I nodded slowly. Every word out of his mouth was another nail in his coffin. He wasn't caring for her. He was hosting gambling nights. He was probably running a bookie operation out of our childhood living room while Mom was locked away in her room or already dumped at the shelter. "I understand," I said. "You did what you had to do." I stood up, leaving the water untouched on the table. "I should go," I said. "I need to check into my hotel." "You are not staying here?" he asked, and I could hear the hope in his voice. He wanted me gone. "No," I said. "I would not want to impose. And honestly, the memories, it is too much." Leonard nodded vigorously. "I get it. Totally. You stay at the hotel. I will see you at the funeral home tomorrow." "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow." I walked toward the door. Leonard followed me, practically herding me out. "Oh, and Gary," he said as I stepped onto the porch. The waiver, I patted my chest pocket. "I will sign it tomorrow, Leonard, after the service. It feels wrong to talk business tonight." He looked annoyed, but he forced a smile. "Right. Of course, tomorrow is fine." I walked down the steps and got into my car. I watched Leonard close the door and lock it immediately. I waited until I saw the porch light flick off. Then I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened the app connected to the transmitter. I put my earbuds in. The audio was crystal clear. I heard the sound of a bottle opening, the clink of glass, and then Beatrice's voice. She must have been hiding in the kitchen or upstairs the whole time. "Is he gone?" she asked. "Yeah, he is gone," Leonard said. His voice was different now, arrogant, mocking. "God, he is so old. He looks like a turtle. And he bought it. He actually bought the story about the face." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "Did he sign the papers?" Beatrice asked. "Tomorrow," Leonard said. "He is soft." I played the grieving son card, and he folded. "We will have the deed by noon tomorrow. Then we can pay off Marco." Marco. That must be the loan shark. "I hope so," Beatrice said. "Because if that check does not clear by Monday, we are dead. Literally." I listened as they laughed. It was the laughter of people who thought they had gotten away with murder. I sat there in the dark car, listening to them toast to my mother's death, listening to them plan their new life in Florida with my father's money. I started the engine. The low hum of the car masked the sound of my own breathing. They thought the house was empty. They thought they were alone. But they had just invited a spy into their war room. I drove away slowly, the audio feed still playing in my ear. I had the evidence of their negligence. I had the evidence of their fraud. But I needed more. I needed to know exactly who Marco was, and I needed to ensure that when the hammer came down, it came down on everyone involved. Tomorrow was the funeral. But tonight, I had a lot of listening to do. The dead were not resting, and neither was I. I drove to the downtown district where the skyscrapers cast long shadows over the empty streets. My destination was the law office of Vance and Associates. Rachel Vance had been my father's attorney for 30 years. She was the one who drafted his will, and she was the only person in this town I trusted to tell me the truth. When I walked into her office, she didn't offer me coffee or small talk. She looked at me with the sharp, analytical eyes of a woman who had seen every kind of family tragedy imaginable. She simply pointed to the leather chair opposite her desk. "Gary," she said, "I am glad you came. We have a problem. A very expensive problem." She slid a thick file folder across the polished mahogany desk. It hit the edge near my hand with a heavy thud. I opened it. The first page was a foreclosure notice, but it was not from a bank. It was a private lien drafted by a shell company I did not recognize. "Your brother has been busy," Rachel said, leaning back in her chair. "You know he has always considered himself an investor. Well, about 6 months ago, Leonard discovered cryptocurrency. He thought he was smarter than the market. He leveraged everything. He drained his own savings, maxed out his credit cards, and then he did something unforgivable." I looked up from the documents. "What did he do, Rachel?" "He forged your mother's signature on a power of attorney document." 6 months ago," she said. "He used that forgery to take out a high-interest private loan against the house. He borrowed $300,000 from a group of individuals who do not operate within the legal banking system. He put the house up as collateral." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The men I saw outside the house, the ones threatening him, they weren't just angry contractors. They were enforcers. "He lost it all, didn't he?" I asked. "Every cent," Rachel confirmed. "The market crashed 2 weeks later. Leonard is currently underwater by nearly $500,000. And these lenders, they don't send late notices. They send people to break your legs. The loan is due in full next Monday." Monday. The timeline was starting to make sense. Leonard wasn't just greedy. He was terrified. He was a rat trapped in a corner, and he had thrown his own mother to the wolves to save his own skin. "But the house isn't enough to cover the interest and the principal," I said, doing the math in my head. "Even if he sells it, the closing takes months. He needs cash now." Rachel nodded slowly. She reached into her drawer and pulled out another document. This one was yellowed with age. I recognized my father's handwriting on the margins. It was a life insurance policy from 1985. "This is the missing piece," Rachel said. "Your father took out this policy to ensure your mother would be cared for if he died first. It is a term life policy with a very specific, very unusual rider. The benefit is $500,000. But there is an expiration clause." I leaned in, squinting at the fine print. "The policy pays out the full death benefit only if the insured passes away before the age of 95, Rachel read aloud. "If the insured survives past their 95th birthday, the policy matures into a simple annuity worth a fraction of that amount. It was a way to keep the premiums low back in the 80s. Your father never imagined Evelyn would live this long." I sat back, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "When is Mom's birthday?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Rachel looked at her calendar. "Next Tuesday," she said. "She turns 95 next Tuesday." The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Tick, tock, tick, tock, counting down the minutes of my mother's life. "If Mom is alive on Tuesday, the policy is worthless," I whispered. "But if she dies before Tuesday?" "Then Leonard gets a check for $500,000 tax-free within 48 hours, Rachel finished. "Enough to pay off the sharks. Enough to save his own life." I closed the file folder. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so intense it felt cold. Leonard wasn't just waiting for nature to take its course. He had engineered a timeline. He had taken Mom to that shelter and dumped her there, hoping the stress and the elements would kill her. He needed her dead before Tuesday. And when the shelter called me instead of the morgue, he had to improvise. He had to declare her dead anyway. He had to fake the death certificate, rush the cremation, to destroy the evidence and claim the insurance money before the clock struck midnight on Monday. "He is trying to beat the clock," I said. "He is not grieving. He is racing against an expiration date." Rachel took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Gary, if he has gone this far, if he has falsified legal documents and involved loan sharks, he is dangerous. He has nothing left to lose. If he finds out Evelyn is still alive, he will finish the job, I said. Rachel didn't argue. She just looked at me with grim understanding. What are you going to do? She asked. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I picked up the foreclosure notice and the copy of the insurance policy. I am going to let him think he has won, I said. I am going to let him think the money is his. I am going to let him stand up at that funeral and dig his own grave, and then I am going to push him in. Rachel stood up and extended her hand. Be careful, Gary. These people he owes money to, they don't care about family drama. They just want their cash. I shook her hand firmly. They will get their payment, I said. Just not from my mother's blood. I walked out of the office and into the night. The city lights blurred as I drove. I thought about my father. He was a good man. He bought that insurance policy to protect Mom, to make sure she was safe and warm in her old age. He worked double shifts to pay those premiums. He sacrificed his own comfort for her future. And now his youngest son was twisting that act of love into a weapon. Leonard was turning my father's legacy into a bounty on my mother's head. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Leonard had turned the calendar into a gun. But he didn't know that I had stopped the clock. He didn't know that the target of his greed was sitting in a hotel room eating strawberry ice cream and waiting for her son to come home. I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. It was almost midnight. Friday was coming. The funeral was coming. And Leonard Caldwell was about to have the worst payday of his life. I drove back toward the hotel, checking my mirrors every few blocks. I wasn't just an engineer anymore. I was a bodyguard. And my shift was just beginning. The streetlights were buzzing overhead, casting long, sickly yellow shadows against the pavement as I turned the corner onto Elm Street. It was past midnight. The neighborhood was asleep, the kind of deep suburban silence that usually only gets broken by a stray dog barking or the wind rustling the oak trees. But as I approached the house, I saw something that did not belong. Parked right in front of the driveway, blocking the path to the garage, was a black SUV. The engine was idling, the low rumble vibrating through the quiet night air. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like oil slicks. It was not a car that belonged in this neighborhood. It was a shark swimming in a koi pond. I slowed my rental car to a crawl and killed the headlights. I parked 3 houses down, sliding into the darkness under the canopy of a large maple tree. I was not just a brother returning home anymore. I was a man conducting surveillance on enemy territory. I cracked my window just an inch. The air was cool, but the scene unfolding on the front porch was heating up. Leonard was standing by the front door. Under the harsh glare of the porch light, he looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. But the men standing in front of him were not parents. There were 2 of them. One was leaning against the porch railing, picking his fingernails with a knife. He was huge, a wall of muscle wrapped in a leather jacket that strained at the seams. The other man was closer to Leonard. He was shorter, wiry, with a shaved head and a tattoo of a spiderweb creeping up his neck from beneath his collar. I stepped out of my car quietly and moved through the shadows of the neighbor's hedge. I needed to hear this. I needed to confirm what Rachel had told me. Please, Leonard's voice drifted across the lawn. It was high-pitched, laced with panic. You have to give me until Tuesday. Just until Tuesday. The wiry man stepped forward. He didn't yell. He spoke in a low, flat hiss that carried more menace than a scream ever could. Monday, Leonard. The agreement was Monday. You said you had the liquid assets. You said the house was yours. It is mine, Leonard stammered. I mean, it will be. My mother, She passed away. The funeral is Friday. The insurance check clears on Tuesday. It is a sure thing. 500,000. I will have it all for you, plus the interest. The man reached out and grabbed Leonard by the lapel of his rumpled shirt. He jerked my brother forward until their noses were almost touching. We do not care about your dead mother, Leonard. We care about our money. The boss is getting impatient. He does not like it when people play games with his capital. I am not playing games, Leonard squealed. I swear. She is dead. I have the body. Well, the funeral home has it. It is happening. I just need a few more days. The big man on the railing looked up. He pointed the knife at Leonard. You have 10 fingers, Leonard. If we do not have 300 grand by noon on Monday, you are going to have 9, and then 8. Do you understand the math? I felt a cold disgust settle in my stomach. This was the reality of my brother's life. He had invited violence to our doorstep. He had sold our safety for a gamble he lost. But as much as I despised him in that moment, I knew I had to step in. Not to save him, not yet, but to play my part. If I stayed in the shadows, they might kill him before I had the chance to destroy him legally. And I wanted Leonard to be alive when the world crashed down on him. I adjusted my jacket, took a deep breath, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. I adopted a confused, shuffling gait. I let my shoulders slump. I became the tired, grieving, clueless older brother. Hey! I called out, my voice cracking slightly. Leonard. Is that you? The 3 men on the porch froze. The big man slipped the knife into his pocket in one fluid motion. The wiry man released Leonard's shirt and smoothed it down, transforming instantly from a predator into a casual visitor. Leonard looked at me with sheer terror. His eyes were wide, begging me to run, or maybe begging me to save him. Gary, he choked out. You are back. I walked up the driveway, my shoes crunching on the gravel. I looked at the 2 strangers with a polite, inquisitive smile. I am sorry to interrupt, I said. I did not know we had company. Are these friends of yours, Leonard? Leonard opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed. The wiry man stepped down from the porch. He looked me up and down, assessing my watch, my shoes, the cut of my suit. He was calculating my net worth in seconds. We are business associates, the man said. His voice was smooth now, almost charming. We were just offering our condolences to your brother. He is very broken up about your mother. I nodded slowly, walking past him to stand next to Leonard. I put a hand on Leonard's shoulder. He was trembling so hard his teeth were almost chattering. Thank you, I said to the thug. It has been a hard week. Leonard has been taking it very hard. He was very close to Mom. He has been handling everything. The house, the finances. He is a good son. The thug smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I am sure he is. We were just discussing the inheritance. It is a complex process, isn't it? Very, I said. But Leonard has it under control. He is the sole beneficiary. I am just here to say goodbye. I walked away from the money years ago. The thug's eyes lit up. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. He wanted confirmation that Leonard was good for the debt. He wanted to know that no one else was fighting for the assets. That is generous of you, the man said. Well, we should get going. We do not want to intrude on your grief. He turned to Leonard and patted him on the cheek. It looked like a friendly gesture, but I saw the force behind it. I saw Leonard flinch. We will see you Monday, Leonard, the man said, to finalize the paperwork. Monday, Leonard whispered. Yes, Monday. The 2 men walked down the driveway, their movements synchronized and silent. They got into the black SUV. The engine roared to life and the car peeled away, disappearing into the night. Leonard sagged against the doorframe. He looked like he was about to vomit. He slid down until he was sitting on the dirty porch floor, his head in his hands. "Who were they really, Leonard?" I asked. My voice was soft, but I dropped the confused act. I wanted him to know that I saw him. He looked up at me. His face was pale sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "Just investors," he lied. "We had a deal go south. Real estate." "It is complicated, Gary. You would not understand." I looked at his hands, his shaking fingers. "They seemed very intense for real estate agents," I said. "They mentioned Monday. Is there a problem with the funeral schedule?" "No," Leonard snapped, scrambling to his feet. "No problem. Friday is the funeral. Tuesday, I pay them. It is fine. Everything is fine." I stared at him. He was pathetic. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, and instead of asking for a rope, he was trying to convince me the view was nice. "Good," I said, "because I want Mom's send-off to be perfect. She deserves the best." "She will get it," Leonard muttered, wiping his face with his sleeve. "It will be a nice service. Quiet. Dignified." I smiled. It was the same smile I gave the loan shark, but with a different meaning. Leonard thought I was talking about flowers and hymns. He didn't know I was talking about justice. "Don't worry, Leonard," I said, reaching for the doorknob. "This funeral is going to be big, bigger than you can imagine. Everyone is going to remember it." I opened the door and walked into the house that smelled of smoke and lies. I left Leonard standing on the porch in the dark, clutching his own hands, counting his fingers, and praying for a Tuesday that would never come. He thought the sharks were the ones he had to worry about. He didn't realize the real predator was the one sleeping in the guest room down the hall. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times. The sound reverberated through the dining room, bouncing off the dark wood paneling and the crystal chandelier that had not been dusted in months. I sat at the head of the table, my father's seat. It felt strange to be there again. For 30 years, this table had been the center of our universe. It was where we carved the turkey at Thanksgiving. It was where I did my homework while Mom sewed in the corner. Now it was just a surface for a greasy pizza box and a stack of legal documents. Leonard sat across from me. He was not eating. He was vibrating. His leg was bouncing up and down under the table, shaking the silverware. He had poured himself a glass of whiskey, and he was gripping it so tight I thought the glass might shatter in his hand. Beatrice was in the kitchen, loudly banging pots and pans, pretending to clean, but I knew she was listening. She was the architect of this greed, but Leonard was the one who had to execute the demolition. He slid a single sheet of paper across the mahogany surface. It moved smoothly, stopping right in front of my plate. "There it is," Leonard said. His voice was tight, strained. "The waiver." I looked down at the document. It was standard legal boilerplate, but the intent was malicious. By signing this, I would be voluntarily relinquishing any claim to the Caldwell estate. I would be admitting that I had no interest in the house, the savings, or the personal effects of Evelyn Caldwell. I would be handing my brother a loaded gun and thanking him for pulling the trigger. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my reading glasses. I put them on slowly, taking my time to wipe the lenses with a handkerchief. I could feel Leonard's eyes burning holes in my forehead. "Read it," he said. "It is exactly what we discussed. Standard procedure." I looked up at him over the rim of my glasses. "It seems very final, Leonard." "It is final," he snapped. "That is the point. Look, Gary, let us be real for a second. You have your life in New York. You have your pension. You do not need this. You do not need the headache of maintaining an old house. You do not need the guilt of taking money from the brother who actually stayed." He took a large gulp of whiskey, the liquid courage splashing onto his chin. He wiped it away angrily. I stayed Gary. I was here every day, when she forgot how to use a spoon, when she woke up screaming at night because she did not know where she was. I was the one holding her hand. I was the one cleaning up the messes. Where were you? You were hundreds of miles away, sending a check and thinking that was enough. It was not enough. I listened to his words. They were designed to hurt. They were designed to dig into the soft underbelly of my conscience and twist. If I did not know the truth, if I did not know that he had dumped her at a shelter, the moment things got hard, these words might have destroyed me. But I knew. I knew he was projecting his own sins onto me. You are right, Leonard, I said softly. I was not here. Exactly, he said, leaning forward. His eyes were wide, pleading, and predatory at the same time. Mom knew it too. In her lucid moments, she used to ask why you never came. She used to cry Gary. She used to say that you must hate her. Do you want to know what her last words were? I held my breath. I waited for the lie. She said, "Tell Gary I forgive him," Leonard whispered, "even though he abandoned me." I felt a flash of pure, white-hot rage. It took every ounce of my discipline not to reach across the table and strike him. He was using the voice of a woman he tried to kill to manipulate me into signing away her safety. It was the lowest thing I had ever witnessed a human being do. I looked down at the paper so he would not see the fire in my eyes. I picked up the pen he had placed next to the document. It was a cheap plastic pen chewed at the end. I want to do what is right by Mom, I said, my voice trembling. I made sure to make my hand shake as I hovered the pen over the signature line. Leonard stopped breathing. He leaned in closer, his entire body tense like a coiled spring. Do it, Gary. Do it for her. Let her rest in peace. Do not make her spirit watch us fight over money. I touched the tip of the pen to the paper. A tiny dot of ink appeared. Leonard's eyes lit up. He was imagining the $300,000. He was imagining the loan sharks walking away. He was imagining the beach in Florida. Then I pulled the pen back. I set it down on the table with a soft click. I cannot sign this yet, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb right before detonation. What Leonard whispered. I need to read the fine print, Leonard, I said, tapping the paragraph at the bottom. There is a clause here about liability for outstanding debts, and this section about the insurance policy. I am not a lawyer. I need to understand what I am agreeing to. My eyes are not what they used to be. The text is very small. Leonard's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. The veins in his neck bulged. "Read it," he screamed. He slammed his fist onto the table. The silverware jumped. The pizza box rattled. Are you kidding me? It is one page, Gary. It says you get nothing. That is the only clause you need to understand. You get nothing because you deserve nothing. He stood up his chair, scraping violently against the floor. You are doing this on purpose, he spat. You are trying to stall. You want to drag this out so you can squeeze money out of me. I know your game. You are jealous. You have always been jealous that Mom loved me more. I looked up at him, keeping my expression fearful and confused. Leonard, please, I said. I am not trying to cause trouble. I want to be sure. It is a legal document. Dad always taught us to measure twice and cut once. Don't you talk about Dad, he roared. Dad is dead. Mom is dead. And you are killing me with this bureaucracy. I need that signature tonight, Gary. I need it now. He reached for the pen and tried to shove it back into my hand. His grip was wet and clammy. Sign the damn paper, Gary. Sign it or get out of my house. I pulled my hand away, acting terrified. Beatrice appeared in the doorway, a dish towel in her hand, looking from Leonard to me with wide eyes. She knew he was losing control. She knew he was about to blow their cover. "Leonard, calm down," she said sharply. "You are scaring him." "I am not scaring him," Leonard yelled, though he backed off slightly. "He is playing dumb. He is sitting there with that blank look on his face, judging me." I stood up slowly, using the table for support. I acted as if my knees were weak. "I am sorry, Leonard," I said. "I did not mean to upset you. I know you are under a lot of pressure." I took a deep breath, smoothing down the front of my jacket. "I will sign it," I said. Leonard froze. The anger drained out of him, replaced by instant relief. "You will, yes," I said, "but not tonight. My nerves are shot. I cannot think straight with you yelling at me." I looked him in the eye. "I will sign it tomorrow. At the funeral." Leonard frowned. "At the funeral, why?" "Because I want the family to see," I said. "I want Aunt Martha and Uncle Bob and all the cousins to see me sign it. I want them to know that I am not the greedy monster you say I am. I want to clear my name, Leonard. I will sign the waiver on the casket right before the service starts. A public declaration that I am honoring Mom's wishes." I watched the gears turn in his head. He hated the idea of waiting another 12 hours, but the idea of a public spectacle appealed to his narcissism. He liked the idea of me bowing down to him in front of an audience. He liked the idea of being the benevolent victor while the prodigal son admitted defeat for everyone to see. And besides, I added, lowering my voice, "if I sign it there in front of witnesses, no one can ever challenge it. It will be ironclad." Leonard looked at Beatrice. She gave a small, imperceptible nod. They had no choice. If they pushed me too hard tonight, I might walk away and get a lawyer. They needed me compliant. "Fine," Leonard said. He picked up the waiver and shoved it back into the folder. "Fine. We do it your way. Tomorrow morning. At the viewing. Before the priest speaks." I nodded. "Before the priest speaks," I agreed. Leonard let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. He slumped back into his chair and picked up his whiskey. "You better not flake on me, Gary," he warned. "If you embarrass me tomorrow—" "I will not embarrass you, Leonard," I said. "I promise. Tomorrow will be a day no one in this family will ever forget." I turned and walked toward the front door. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had done it. I had baited the trap. I had maneuvered him exactly where I needed him to be. He was going to bring the waiver to the funeral. He was going to set the stage for his own execution. I walked out into the cool night air. The black SUV was gone, but the threat hung heavy in the atmosphere. I looked back at the house one last time. I could see Leonard through the window, pouring another drink, laughing at something Beatrice said. They were celebrating. They thought they had bullied the old engineer into submission. I got into my car and drove back toward the hotel where my mother was waiting. I needed to get a good night's sleep. I needed to be sharp. Tomorrow I wasn't just building a bridge. I was dropping the hammer. And when it fell, it was going to shatter Leonard's world into 1,000,000 irreparable pieces. I parked my rental car outside the brick building that housed the county sheriff's department. The morning sun was hiding behind a thick layer of gray clouds threatening rain. It was fitting weather for what I was about to do. I walked inside, the smell of floor wax and old coffee hitting me instantly. I didn't need to ask for directions. The man sitting behind the glass partition in the corner office was Jim Miller. 50 years ago, he was the quarterback of our high school football team, and I was the offensive tackle who kept him from getting crushed. Now he was the chief of police, and I was about to ask him to run one last play with me. Jim looked up as I entered. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were still sharp. He stood up and shook my hand, a firm grip that hadn't weakened over the decades. We didn't waste time on pleasantries. I told him everything. I laid out the timeline. I showed him the foreclosure notice. I showed him the insurance policy. And then I took out my phone and played the audio recording I had captured from under the coffee table the night before. We sat in silence as Leonard's voice filled the small office, bragging about the money, mocking my mother's memory, and admitting to the fraud. I watched Jim's jaw tighten. When the recording ended with Beatrice laughing about the vacation in Florida, Jim slammed his hand on the desk. "This isn't just fraud," Jim said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is elder abuse. It is kidnapping. If he falsified a death certificate, that is a felony on a federal level." I nodded. I knew the law, but I needed more than an arrest. I needed a public execution of his character. I needed to make sure that when he went down, he stayed down, and that the loan sharks saw it happen, so they would know the money was gone forever. "I need you at the funeral home, Jim," I said. "Not in uniform. Not yet. I need you in the back. I need you to wait until he signs the waiver. I need him to commit the final act of fraud in front of witnesses." Jim looked at me, studying my face. He saw the cold resolve in my eyes. He saw the engineer who had calculated the structural failure point of his own family. "We will be there," Jim said. "I will have 2 deputies in plain clothes by the exits, and I will be in the back row. Just give me the signal." I thanked him and walked out. The legal trap was set. Now I had to prepare the star witness. I drove back to the hotel. The Do Not Disturb sign was still on the door of the suite. I let myself in quietly. The room was warm and smelled of lavender soap. Brenda, the nurse, was sitting in the corner reading a magazine. She looked up and gave me a thumbs up. "She's having a good day," Brenda whispered. "She is very lucid." I walked into the bedroom. Mom was sitting by the window looking out at the traffic below. She was wearing a soft white robe. Her hair had been washed and brushed. When she turned to look at me, her eyes were clear. The fog of dementia that usually clouded her mind seemed to have lifted, perhaps sensing the gravity of the moment. "Hi, Gary," she said softly. "Hi, Mom," I said, pulling a chair up next to her. I took her hands in mine. They were cold. I rubbed them gently to warm them up. I needed to do something difficult. I needed to make her relive the trauma one last time so we could end it forever. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Do you remember the night you left the house? Do you remember the drive?" Her smile faded. Her hands flinched in mine. A shadow passed over her face, a look of pure, unadulterated fear. She looked down at her lap, her fingers picking nervously at the fabric of her robe. "He said we were going to get ice cream," she whispered. Her voice trembled. It was late. I was already in my nightgown, but Leonard said it was a special treat. He said I had been good. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I pressed on. I took out my phone and set it on the table, the camera lens facing her. "And then what happened, Mom? We drove for a long time," she said, her eyes filling with tears. It was dark. The road was bumpy. I asked him where the ice cream shop was. He told me to shut up. He turned the radio up very loud. It was heavy metal music. It hurt my ears. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "He stopped the car," she continued. "It was in the middle of nowhere. There were no streetlights. He opened the door and pulled me out. He pulled me hard, Gary. He hurt my arm." She pulled up the sleeve of her robe. On her upper arm, fading but still visible, were the dark purple bruises of fingerprints. My brother's fingerprints. "He told me to sit on the curb," she said, her voice breaking. "He said to wait there. He said he had to check the tires. And then he got back in the car. I saw the red taillights. And then they got smaller and smaller. And then it was just dark. I called his name. I called your name. But nobody came." I reached out and wiped the tear from her cheek. My own heart was breaking, shattering into a million pieces, but I used that pain to fuel my resolve. "I am here now, Mom," I said fiercely, "and I am never leaving you again." I stopped the recording. That video was the final nail. It was the evidence that would ensure Leonard never saw the outside of a prison cell for the rest of his life. I stood up and went to the closet. Hanging there, protected by a plastic bag, was the dress I had bought for her yesterday. It was royal blue silk with lace detailing on the collar. It was the kind of dress she used to wear to church on Easter Sunday. It was a dress for a living woman, not a shroud for a corpse. I took it out and held it up. "Mom," I said, "I need you to do something brave for me." She looked at the dress and then at me. "We are going to a party," she asked, a glimmer of hope returning to her eyes. "Yes," I said, "a very special party. We are going to surprise Leonard." Her face hardened slightly. The fear was replaced by a spark of defiance. She was a Caldwell. She was tough. She had raised 2 boys on a factory worker's salary. She had survived abandonment. "I want to see his face," she said. "I want to see him when he sees me." "You will," I promised. I called Brenda over. "Let's get her ready," I said. "I want her to look perfect. Hair, makeup, everything." As Brenda went to work, I stood by the window and watched the rain start to fall against the glass. It was noon. The viewing was scheduled for 10 a.m. the next morning. Leonard was probably at the funeral home right now, picking out the cheapest urn he could find, shaking hands with the loan sharks, thinking he had pulled off the perfect crime. I looked back at Mom. She was sitting up straighter now. The blue dress brought out the color in her eyes. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a matriarch. She looked like justice personified. I walked over and adjusted the lace collar of her dress. I smoothed down her silver hair. "You look beautiful, Mom," I said. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "Gary," she said. "Yes, Mom, make sure you wear your good tie," she said. "The red one. Dad always liked the red one." I laughed, a short, sharp sound. Even now she was still being a mother. "I will, Mom. I will wear the red tie." I kissed her on the forehead. "Get some rest," I said. "Tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow you are not going to be the deceased. Tomorrow you are going to be the queen of the ball. And Leonard is going to be the court jester who lost his head." I walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I sat on the sofa in the living area of the suite and opened my laptop. I had one last email to write. I needed to send the video file to Jim Miller, just in case anything happened to me before the morning. I attached the file. I hit send. The preparation was complete. The actors were in place. The script was written. All that was left was for the curtain to rise. And I was going to make sure that when it fell, it brought the whole house down on top of Leonard. The funeral home smelled like a botanical garden that was trying too hard to cover up the scent of decay. White lilies and hothouse roses spilled out of massive golden vases that lined the walls. A string quartet sat in the corner, playing a mournful, weeping melody that tugged at the heartstrings of everyone who walked through the double doors. Everyone except me. I knew exactly how much this display cost. I also knew that the credit card used to pay for it was maxed out, and the check for the musicians was going to bounce on Monday morning. Leonard had staged a royal send-off for a woman he had thrown away like garbage. It was grotesque. It was a theater production, and he had cast himself as the tragic hero. I walked down the center aisle of the viewing room. The carpet was thick and plush, swallowing the sound of my footsteps. The room was already filling up. Leonard had clearly called in every favor and guilt-tripped every distant relative to ensure a full house. There were cousins I had not seen since high school. There were neighbors from the old block who brought casseroles and condolences. And right in the front, sitting like a vulture in a black veil, was my Aunt Martha. She had always been critical of me, even when I was a child. Today she looked at me with open hostility. As I passed her pew, the whispering began. It started as a low murmur, like the buzzing of angry bees, and then it grew louder. I could hear snippets of their judgment floating in the air. "That is him. That is the brother who left. He did not even come home when she got sick." Leonard did everything. Look at him walking in here like he owns the place. He does not even look sad. I kept my eyes forward, fixing them on the closed casket at the front of the room. It was a magnificent piece of mahogany polished to a mirror shine with brass handles that gleamed under the soft recessed lighting. It was also completely sealed. Leonard had told everyone the lie about the fall, about the disfigurement. He had painted a picture of a horrific accident to hide the fact that the box was empty, or maybe he had filled it with sandbags to give it weight. The thought made my stomach turn, but I did not let it show on my face. I kept my expression neutral, cold, detached. To them, I was the heartless engineer who treated death like a math problem. To me, I was the dam holding back a flood that was about to drown them all. I reached the front row and sat down in the seat reserved for the immediate family. It was just me and the empty space where Leonard should be. He was currently standing near the entrance, shaking hands, accepting hugs, and playing the role of the devastated son to perfection. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped, his eyes of arms red-rimmed. Whether the redness was from crying or from the whiskey he drank last night, only I knew the truth. Beatrice was seated across the aisle, surrounded by a group of women from the church auxiliary. She was putting on a performance that would have made a soap opera actress jealous. She was dabbing at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, heaving dramatic sighs that shook her entire body. Every time someone approached her, she would wail softly about how much she was going to miss Mom, about how she had cared for her like her own flesh and blood. It took every ounce of my self-control not to stand up and scream. This was the woman who had called my mother a burden. This was the woman who had laughed about selling the house and moving to Florida while listening to my brother plan fraud. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. I did not cry, I did not sniffle, I did not look for comfort. I stared at the casket, imagining my mother sitting in her hotel room right now watching the live feed I had set up on a private link for the police chief. Yes, Jim Miller was here. I had seen him slip in through the side door a few minutes ago, dressed in a dark suit that blended into the shadows. He gave me a barely perceptible nod before taking a position near the back exit. His deputies were stationed outside. The trap was armed. A shadow fell over me. I looked up to see Uncle Bob standing there. He was my father's younger brother, a man who had always been easily swayed by Leonard's charm. His face was red with suppressed anger. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here, Gary," he hissed, leaning down so only I could hear. I looked at him calmly. "It is my mother's funeral, Bob. I have every right to be here." "You lost that right years ago," he spat. "Leonard told us everything. How you refused to help with the medical bills, how you tried to force them to put her in a home, and now you come back to claim your share of the inheritance. You make me sick." I did not defend myself. I did not argue. Any defense I offered now would just look like desperation. I needed them to hate me. I needed the tension in the room to be so thick you could cut it with a knife. The higher the pedestal they put Leonard on, the harder he would fall. "I am sorry you feel that way, Bob," I said quietly. He scoffed and turned away, marching back to his seat to whisper more poison into Aunt Martha's ear. I could feel the hatred radiating from the room. It was a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. They wanted me to be the villain. Fine. I would be the villain. For 10 more minutes. The string quartet stopped playing. The silence that descended on the room was heavy and suffocating. The funeral director, a somber man in a tailcoat, stepped forward to the microphone. He welcomed everyone and spoke about the sanctity of life and the tragedy of loss. He spoke about Mom as if he knew her, reciting generic platitudes that could have applied to anyone. It was hollow. It was meaningless. And now he said, looking toward the back of the room, "I would like to invite Leonard Caldwell, Evelyn's devoted son and caretaker, to share a few words." The room seemed to hold its breath. I turned slightly in my seat. Leonard was walking down the aisle. He moved slowly as if the weight of his grief was too much to bear. He stopped at Beatrice's row and squeezed her hand. She looked up at him with tragic adoration. It was sickening. He walked past me. He did not look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on the podium on the prize. He stepped up to the microphone and gripped the sides of the lectern as if he needed it to hold himself up. He looked out at the crowd, at the sea of faces that looked back at him with sympathy and love. He took a shaky breath. He looked down at his notes. He looked confident. He looked like a man who believed his own lie. He thought the hard part was over. He thought the money was his. He thought the brother in the front row was defeated. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and touched the cool metal of the phone. I was ready. The video file was cued. The connection to the large projector screen behind the casket, which was currently displaying a slideshow of old family photos, was established. Leonard cleared his throat. "Mom was the light of my life," he began, his voice breaking perfectly on the last word. I sat back in my chair and crossed my legs. "Go ahead, Leonard. Speak. Tell them your story. Because in about 5 minutes, the dead are going to speak back, and they are going to have a lot to say." Leonard gripped the sides of the wooden podium so hard that his knuckles turned white. He looked out at the sea of black-clad mourners, his eyes glistening with tears that I knew were summoned on command. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the sound amplified by the microphone echoing through the silent room, like a theatrical sigh. He was playing the role of the grieving martyr, the dutiful son left behind to pick up the pieces, and the audience was eating it up. I could see Aunt Martha nodding sympathetically in the second row, clutching a tissue to her chest. I could see the neighbors dabbing their eyes. They saw a broken man. I saw a desperate gambler trying to bluff his way through the most important hand of his life. Mom was a saint. Leonard began, his voice thick with emotion. She was the bedrock of this family. When our father passed, she held us together. She gave us everything she had, even when she had nothing left to give. And in her final years, when her mind started to fade, when the darkness of dementia began to steal her away from us, it was my honor, my absolute privilege, to be her light. He paused for effect, looking down at his shoes, as if overwhelmed by the memory. It was not easy, he continued, lifting his head to look directly at the crowd. There were nights when she did not know my name. There were nights when she screamed in fear. There were the doctors, the medicines, the daily struggle to keep her comfortable, to keep her safe. I gave up my career. I gave up my social life. I gave up everything to ensure that Evelyn Caldwell knew she was loved every single second of every single day. I sat in the front row, my face a mask of stone. Inside, my blood was boiling. He was describing a sacrifice he never made. He was describing a devotion he never felt. He had not given up his career. He had been fired for embezzlement. He had not given up his social life. He was out gambling while Mom sat alone in her room. And he certainly had not kept her safe. He had driven her into the darkness and left her there. "But I did it gladly," Leonard said, his voice rising in volume. "Because that is what family does. Family shows up. Family stays. Family does not run away when things get hard." He turned his head slowly. His eyes locked onto mine. The sorrow in his expression vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp accusation. The entire room followed his gaze. 100 pairs of eyes landed on me. I could feel their judgment. It was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. "It breaks my heart," Leonard said, pointing a shaking finger at me, "that not everyone in this room understands that duty. It breaks my heart that when Mom needed support the most, when she was crying out for her family, she only had me. My brother Gary was not there." The room erupted in whispers. I heard the word shame hissed from somewhere behind me. Leonard let the murmur build, feeding off the negative energy. He was turning the funeral into a trial, and he was the judge, jury, and executioner. Gary Leonard said, addressing me directly now. You built bridges in New York while I built a home for Mom here. You sent checks cold and impersonal, thinking that money could replace love. Well, I have news for you. Mom did not want your money. She wanted her son, and you were not there. You abandoned her. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded document. The waiver. He held it up for everyone to see. And now you come back, Leonard sneered. Now when the work is done. Now when there is nothing left to do but count the assets. You come back here sitting in the front row, wearing your expensive suit, acting like you have a right to grieve. You do not have that right, Gary. You lost it the day you stopped calling. You lost it the day you decided your career was more important than your mother. He walked down the steps of the podium, closing the distance between us. He stood right in front of me, looming over my chair. He thrust the paper toward my chest. You do not deserve to be Mom's son, he spat loud enough for the back row to hear. You do not deserve to be here. If you have a single shred of decency left in your body, if you have any respect for her memory at all, you will sign this paper. You will admit that you have no claim on this family. Sign it, Gary. Sign it and leave so those of us who actually loved her can say goodbye in peace. The room was deathly silent. No one moved. No one breathed. They were waiting for me to break. They were waiting for the shameful older brother to hang his head, sign the paper, and slink away in disgrace. Leonard was panting slightly, his face flushed with the thrill of victory. He thought he had me cornered. He thought he had used the social pressure of a funeral to force my hand. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at Leonard. I saw the fear behind his arrogance. I saw the desperate need for that signature. I stood up slowly. My knees did not shake. My hands did not tremble. I buttoned my jacket with deliberate precision. I looked Leonard in the eye, and for the first time he flinched. He saw something in my expression that he did not expect. He expected shame. What he saw was calm. Terrifying, absolute calm. I reached out and took the paper from his hand. Leonard smiled, a small, triumphant twitch of his lips. He thought he had won. Then I walked past him. I walked up the 3 steps to the podium. The microphone was still live. I could hear the hum of the speakers. I placed the paper on the wooden stand. I did not sign it. I just left it there. I gripped the microphone. I looked out at the crowd. I looked at Aunt Martha, who was now frowning in confusion. I looked at Uncle Bob, who had his arms crossed. I looked at the loan sharks standing by the exit, looking bored. You are right, Leonard, I said. My voice was steady, deep, filling every corner of the room. I turned to look at him. He was standing in the aisle, looking confused. I was not there, I continued. I was not there when Mom needed her medicine. I was not there when she needed her meals. And I was certainly not there 3 nights ago. Leonard's face went pale. He took a half step back. He knew where I was going, but he could not stop it. I was not there to protect her, I said. And for that I will carry the guilt for the rest of my life. You painted a picture of a devoted son, Leonard. You told everyone here that you held her hand as she slipped away. You told us she died peacefully in her bed. I paused. I let the silence stretch until it was painful. But that is the thing about stories, Leonard. They only work if everyone agrees to believe them. And I do not believe you. Gary, what are you doing? Leonard hissed, stepping forward. Sit down. You are embarrassing yourself. I ignored him. I looked back at the crowd. My brother says I am here for the money. He says I am here to take what isn't mine. He is wrong. I did not come here to inherit a house. I did not come here to claim a bank account. I looked directly at the closed casket. I came here because my brother is a liar. Gasps rippled through the room. Beatrice stood up, screeching. How dare you? This is a funeral. Have some respect, I looked at Beatrice. Respect, I asked. Is it respectful to sell a woman's home while she is still warm? Is it respectful to throw her memories in the trash? I turned back to Leonard. He was shaking his head, his eyes wide with panic. You said I wasn't there when she died, Leonard. I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And you are right. Because she didn't die. The confusion in the room turned into chaos. People were standing up. Voices were raised. She is dead, Leonard screamed, losing all control. I saw her, the doctor saw her. She is in the box, I smiled. It was the smile of the engineer who had just watched the demolition charges detonate perfectly. No, Leonard, I said. She is not in the box is empty, just like your soul. I raised my hands. I looked at the double doors at the back of the room. You said I wasn't here to save her, I said into the microphone. But I am here to bring her back. I clapped my hands together. Once. The sound was sharp like a gunshot. Twice. 3 times. The heavy oak doors at the back of the chapel burst open with a loud crash, slamming against the walls. The sunlight from the lobby flooded into the dim room, blinding everyone for a second. And then a silhouette appeared in the doorway. A wheelchair. And sitting in it wearing a royal blue dress was the woman who was supposed to be in the casket. The heavy oak doors bounced off the walls, the sound echoing like a thunderclap in the silent sanctuary. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight that cut through the gloom of the funeral home, illuminating the figure in the doorway like an angel of vengeance. The nurse, Brenda, stepped forward, pushing the wheelchair with a steady, purposeful rhythm. And there, sitting upright, wearing her best royal blue dress and the pearl necklace my father gave her on their 30th anniversary, was Evelyn Caldwell. She was not a memory. She was not a ghost. She was flesh and blood, her silver hair catching the light, her eyes scanning the room with a mixture of confusion and heartbreak. The air in the room seemed to be sucked out all at once. The gasps that followed were not the polite, stifled sounds of mourning. They were wet, guttural sounds of pure, unadulterated shock. A woman in the 3rd row fainted, slumping sideways into her husband's lap. Aunt Martha stood up, her hand clamped over her mouth, her eyes bulging as if she were witnessing a resurrection from the Bible. But my eyes were fixed on one person. Leonard. My brother was standing on the podium, gripping the microphone stand, as if it were the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. His face, which moments ago had been flushed with the arrogance of his performance, drained of color so fast it was terrifying to watch. He turned a shade of gray that reminded me of wet cement. His mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from the water, but no sound came out. He was looking at the woman he had left on a curb to die, and his brain simply could not process the reality that she had returned to haunt him. Beatrice was the first to break the silence. She let out a scream that was thin and piercing, a sound that grated on the nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. It wasn't a scream of relief. It was a scream of terror. She scrambled backward over the pew, tripping over her own high heels, knocking over a vase of white lilies. The water spilled across the carpet, soaking into the plush fabric, but she didn't care. She was looking at Mom as if she were a monster from a nightmare. "It is a ghost," Beatrice shrieked, pointing a shaking finger. "Oh God, Leonard, it is her ghost!" I stood calmly near the casket, watching the chaos unfold with the detached satisfaction of an engineer watching a controlled demolition. The nurse continued to push Mom down the center aisle. The wheels of the chair squeaked softly on the floor. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It was the sound of judgment approaching. Leonard finally moved. He took a stumbling step backward, away from the approaching wheelchair. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown into black saucers of panic. He was shaking his head violently, muttering to himself. "No," he whispered. "No. I saw the report. It is not possible. You are dead. You are supposed to be dead." He took another step back blindly. He forgot where he was. He forgot about the stage behind him. He forgot about the casket that was the centerpiece of his great lie. His heel caught on the edge of the velvet drape that surrounded the bier. He flailed his arms trying to find his balance, but it was too late. He fell backward, his full weight slamming into the polished mahogany casket. The impact was catastrophic. The casket, which should have been heavy with the weight of a human body, tipped over with alarming ease. It didn't land with a solid, mournful thud. It crashed to the floor with a hollow wooden clatter. The lid which Leonard had sealed shut to hide his crime popped open from the force of the fall. There was no body inside. There was no satin pillow. There was no Evelyn Caldwell. Instead, 3 heavy canvas sandbags rolled out onto the stage, spilling a fine layer of yellow construction sand across the polished floor. The room went deadly silent. The screaming stopped. The weeping stopped. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Everyone stared at the sandbags. The evidence of the fraud was undeniable. It was physical. It was right there, spilling out of the box that Leonard had wept over just minutes ago. Leonard scrambled to his feet, covered in dust. He looked at the sandbags, then at the crowd, then at me. He looked like a cornered animal. The facade of the grieving son had shattered completely, leaving behind only the pathetic, greedy criminal underneath. I walked over to the nurse and took the handles of the wheelchair. I pushed Mom the last few feet, stopping right at the base of the stage, right in front of where Leonard was standing, amidst the wreckage of his lie. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a wireless microphone I had taken from the sound technician earlier. I switched it on and gently placed it in my mother's hand. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was firm. She looked up at her youngest son. She looked at the sweat dripping down his face. She looked at the sandbags on the floor. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She just spoke, her voice amplified by the speaker's frail but cutting through the silence like a diamond blade. "Leonard," she said. Leonard flinched as if she had struck him. "Mom," he whimpered. "Why are you doing this, Leonard?" she asked. Her voice cracked with the weight of a mother's betrayal. "Why are you having a funeral for me?" Leonard opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at the exit, measuring the distance. "I waited for you, Leonard," she continued. "I sat on that curb for 6 hours. I waited in the cold. I kept telling myself you were just checking the tires. I kept telling myself my Leonard would never leave me in the dark." Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. "Why didn't you come back?" she asked. "Why are you here with all these people telling them I am dead when I am still waiting for you to pick me up?" The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was a question that no answer could satisfy. The cruelty of it, the raw, naked truth of his abandonment, hit the crowd like a physical wave. I heard Aunt Martha sob a loud, ugly sound of realization. I saw Uncle Bob stand up. His fists clenched, his face purple with rage. Leonard looked at the crowd. He saw their faces changing. He saw the pity turn to disgust. He saw the sympathy turn to hatred. He realized in that moment that he hadn't just lost the money. He had lost everything. His reputation, his family, his freedom. He looked at me. I was standing next to Mom, my hand on her shoulder. I wasn't smiling anymore. I was just watching him. "It was not supposed to be like this," Leonard whispered. "No, Leonard," I said, my voice carrying without the microphone. "It wasn't. You were supposed to be a son." I looked toward the back of the room. Jim Miller, the police chief, stepped out from the shadows. He wasn't alone. 2 uniformed officers flanked the double doors, blocking the exit. The loan sharks, seeing the police, had already slipped out the side door, leaving Leonard to face the music alone. Leonard saw the badges. He saw the handcuffs glinting on Jim's belt. He looked back at the sandbags. He looked at his wife Beatrice, who was now pretending to faint to avoid the scrutiny. "It is over, Leonard," I said. He slumped against the podium, defeated. The great performance had ended in a tragedy, but not the one he had written. The casket was empty, but the prison cell waiting for him would be very, very full. The silence in the room was shattered by the heavy tread of boots on the plush funeral home carpet. Jim Miller walked down the center aisle, his hand resting casually but firmly on his belt, right next to his service weapon. Behind him walked a woman in a sharp gray suit, carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to crush a man's future. She was the lead investigator from the insurance company. I had sent her the files at the same time I sent them to Jim. They were a coordinated strike team, and Leonard was the target. Leonard looked at Jim, his old high school classmate, and tried to summon a smile. It was a ghastly expression, like a skull trying to grin. He took a step forward, holding his hands out in a pleading gesture. "Jim," he stammered, his voice trembling. "Thank God you are here. You have to help me. This is insane. Gary has lost his mind. He has brought this woman here. He is confusing everyone. It is a prank. It is a sick, twisted prank." Jim did not smile back. He stopped 3 feet away from Leonard. He looked at the empty casket. He looked at the sandbags spilling their contents onto the floor. And then he looked at Leonard with eyes that were as cold as a winter frost. "It is not a prank, Leonard," Jim said. His voice was calm, authoritative. "It is a crime scene." Leonard laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that bounced off the walls. "Crime. What crime? I made a mistake, Jim. A clerical error. The hospital called me. They said she was dead. I acted on the information I had. I was grieving. You cannot arrest a man for grieving." The woman in the gray suit stepped forward. She didn't look at Leonard with pity. She looked at him like he was a column of numbers that didn't add up. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "I am Agent Reynolds from National Life Insurance. We have digital records of you accessing your mother's policy details 3 times in the last 48 hours. We have a recording of you impersonating a medical examiner to expedite a claim. And we have the forged death certificate you submitted to our portal at 3 a.m. this morning. That is not grief, Mr. Caldwell. That is wire fraud. That is insurance fraud. And since the amount exceeds $100,000, that is a Class 1 felony." Leonard's face twitched. He looked for an escape route. He looked at the side door, but the 2 deputies were blocking it, their arms crossed. He looked at the crowd, but the faces that had been so sympathetic 10 minutes ago were now twisted in disgust. "You are lying," Leonard screamed. "You are all lying. You have no proof. It is just words. My brother put you up to this." I sighed. It was a heavy, weary sound. I stepped closer to the podium. I still held the remote control for the projection screen in my hand. "You want proof, Leonard?" I asked. I pointed the remote at the screen behind him. The slideshow of family photos disappeared. The screen went black for a second, and then a video file began to play. It was grainy black and white footage. The timestamp in the corner read Tuesday, 11:42 p.m. It was the security feed from the gas station 200 miles away. The camera angle was wide, showing the dark parking lot and the edge of the woods. The room watched in horrified silence. On the screen, Leonard's car pulled into the frame. He got out. He walked around to the passenger side. He opened the door and pulled a frail figure out of the seat. It was Mom. She was wearing her nightgown. She looked confused. The video showed Leonard pointing toward the woods. It showed him getting back into the car. It showed Mom reaching for the door handle, trying to get back in. And then it showed the car speeding away, leaving an old woman alone in the dark, her hands reaching out for a son who was leaving her to die. A collective gasp ripped through the room. Someone in the back row shouted, "You monster!" I pressed a button, and the audio from the bug I planted under the coffee table began to play over the speakers. Leonard's voice filled the room loud and clear. "She is dead to me anyway," the recording played. Once I get the check on Tuesday, we go to Florida. Who cares if they find the body later? They will never trace it back to us. She is just a Jane Doe now." Leonard stood frozen. The color had drained from his face so completely he looked transparent. The evidence was overwhelming. It was visceral. It stripped him naked in front of the entire town. I looked over at the side exit. The two men I had seen on the porch the night before the loan sharks were standing there. The big one, the man with the knife, looked at Leonard. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. He shook his head slowly, a gesture of finality. He knew he was never getting his money. He knew Leonard was damaged goods. He turned to his partner, muttered something, and they slipped out the door before the police could notice them. Leonard saw them leave, and in that moment he knew it was truly over. The protection of the money was gone. The protection of the lie was gone. Jim Miller pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. "Leonard Caldwell," Jim said. "You are under arrest for attempted murder, kidnapping, fraud, and elder abuse." Leonard scrambled backward, tripping over the sandbags. He fell hard onto the floor, kicking his legs like a child having a tantrum. "No," he screamed. "Beatrice, Beatrice, tell them you helped me. You planned the Florida trip." Beatrice, who had been trying to inch her way toward the door, froze. Every head turned to her. She looked at her husband on the floor, and her survival instinct kicked in. "Me!" she shrieked. "I did not do anything. He forced me. I was scared of him. He is crazy." Leonard's eyes bulged. "You liar," he howled. "You spent the money. You bought the tickets." Jim didn't wait for them to finish their domestic dispute. He hauled Leonard up by his collar and spun him around. He slammed Leonard against the empty casket. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. "You have the right to remain silent," Jim recited, though Leonard was doing anything but remaining silent. He was sobbing now. Ugly, snot-nosed sobs. He looked at Mom, who was still sitting in her wheelchair, watching him with tears in her eyes. "Mom," he wailed. "Mom, tell them to stop. I am your son. I am your baby." Mom looked at him. She didn't look away. She didn't hide. She looked at the man she had given birth to, the man she had raised, the man who had tried to erase her existence for a payout. "You are not my son," she said softly, but in the silence everyone heard it. "My son would never leave me in the dark." Jim and the deputies dragged Leonard down the aisle. He fought them every step of the way, his heels dragging on the carpet, his screams echoing off the vaulted ceiling. He passed by me. He looked into my face, searching for some hint of mercy, some hint of the brotherly bond we used to share. "Gary," he begged. "Gary, please. Do something." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had mocked me for being an engineer, the man who had called me weak, the man who had underestimated the structural integrity of the truth. "I did do something, Leonard," I said calmly. "I fixed the problem." They dragged him out the double doors. The screaming faded as they shoved him into the back of a squad car outside. The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers washed over the room, through the stained glass windows, painting everyone in a cold, rhythmic light. I stood there in the center of the chaos. People were crying. Beatrice was being handcuffed by another deputy as she screamed about her rights. The insurance agent was seizing the files on the podium. I felt a hand on my arm. I looked down. It was Mom. She was reaching for me. "Is he gone?" she asked. "Yes, Mom," I said. "He is gone." I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. Revenge isn't sweet. It is necessary work, like removing a tumor or demolishing a condemned building. It leaves a scar. It leaves a mess. But as I looked at my mother, safe and alive, and as I looked at the empty space where the predator used to be, I knew the foundation was secure again. I adjusted my tie, the red one, the one Dad liked. "Let's go home, Mom," I said. The funeral was over, but our life was just restarting. And this time there were no cracks in the concrete. It took exactly 30 days to scrub the stain of my brother from our lives. The sale of the Victorian house on Elm Street closed yesterday. I did not sell it to the highest bidder. I did not sell it to a developer who wanted to tear it down and build condos. I sold it to a young couple with a baby on the way. They walked in with wide eyes talking about where to put the crib and how to fix the garden. They saw a home, not a dollar sign. I signed the deed with a steady hand, knowing that the walls my father built would finally hold love again instead of greed. As for the proceeds, I did not keep a single dime. $2.5 million is a lot of money. It is enough to buy a villa in Florida. It is enough to buy a fast car. But to me, that money was blood money. It was the price tag Leonard had put on our mother's life. So I redirected every cent. I sat down with Rachel Vance and we drafted the charter for a new nonprofit organization. We called it Evelyn's Hope. The mission is simple. We provide legal and financial assistance to elderly people who have been abandoned or exploited by their families. We hire investigators to find the lost. We hire lawyers to fight the greedy. And we build safe havens, real homes with warm beds and hot meals so that no mother ever has to sit on a curb in the middle of the night wondering why her son left her behind. Beatrice did not fare so well. I heard through the grapevine that she is filing for bankruptcy. Apparently, she was so confident in Leonard's scheme that she spent every penny she had on designer luggage and a deposit for that condo in Boca Raton. When the insurance money did not come and when I evicted her from the house to prepare it for sale, the house of cards collapsed. She called me once begging for help. She said she was family. She said she had nowhere to go. I told her that she was young and healthy and that she should try getting a job. Then I blocked her number. Cruelty is a matter of perspective. To her, I was a monster. To me, I was just balancing the scales. Mom and I moved into a ranch-style house in a quiet suburb about 20 minutes away. It has no stairs. It has big windows that let in the sunlight. And most importantly, it has a garden. Mom spends her mornings there now. The doctors said the trauma might make her regress, that the dementia might get worse. But the opposite happened. Being safe, being truly seen and cared for brought her back to me. She still has bad days, of course. She still forgets where she put her glasses, but she never forgets who I am. This morning, the postman delivered a letter. The envelope was plain white, stamped with the seal of the state penitentiary. The handwriting was jagged and desperate. It was from Leonard. I stood by the fireplace in the living room, listening to the crackle of the birch logs. I held the letter in my hand. I did not open it. I did not need to read it to know what it said. I knew the script. He would apologize. Turned. He would say he found God. He would say it was all a misunderstanding. And then in the last paragraph, he would ask for money. He would ask for a better lawyer. He would ask me to save him one last time. I looked at the envelope for a long time. I thought about the brother I played catch with in the backyard. I thought about the boy I tried to protect from bullies. But then I thought about the man who forged a death certificate. I thought about the man who looked me in the eye at a funeral and told me I was dead to him. That man was not my brother. That man was a stranger who shared my last name. I tossed the unopened letter into the fire. The paper curled and blackened. The blue ink of his name bubbled and vanished. I watched until it was nothing but ash floating up the chimney to be scattered by the wind. There was no anger left in me, just a quiet, heavy peace. The debt was paid. The contract was canceled. Gary, I turned around. Mom was sitting in her armchair, a knitted blanket over her knees. She was looking at me with a smile. "Who were you writing to, dear?" she asked. "No one, Mom," I said, brushing the ash from my hands. "Just junk mail." I walked over to the tea set on the low table. I poured a cup of Earl Grey, steaming and fragrant. I added a splash of milk and 2 sugars just the way she liked it. "Here you go," I said, handing her the cup. She took it with both hands, the warmth spreading through her fingers. She took a sip and sighed with contentment. "You are a good boy, Gary," she said. "You always were." I sat down in the chair opposite her. I picked up my own cup. The house was quiet. The fire was warm. The nightmare was over. "I am just your son, Mom," I said. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. 6 months have passed since that quiet evening by the fire. The seasons changed, the snow melted, and spring arrived, bringing with it a new kind of construction project. You see, an engineer never truly retires. We just changed the scope of the project. Using the funds from the sale of the Victorian house combined with the insurance settlement from the fraud investigation, I didn't just donate money to a faceless charity. I bought an old dilapidated community center on the edge of town. It had good bones, solid steel beams, a deep foundation, but it had been neglected, much like the people it was meant to serve. For the last half year, I put my hard hat back on. I was there every morning at 7:00 a.m., reviewing blueprints, checking load capacities, and ensuring every ramp and hallway was perfectly accessible for the elderly. We named it the Evelyn Center. It wasn't just a shelter. It was a fortress of dignity. Yesterday was the grand opening. Mom insisted on coming, even though her wheelchair navigation is still a bit shaky. When we cut the ribbon, I looked out at the crowd. There were city officials and reporters, sure. But at the back of the room, I saw something that gave me more satisfaction than any skyscraper I ever built. I saw a young woman named Sarah helping her elderly father into one of the new residential suites. I knew their story because I had personally reviewed their application. Her brother had tried to steal the deed to their family farm, leaving the father destitute. But today, he had a warm bed, a hot meal, and a team of pro bono lawyers funded by the center ready to fight for him. I walked over and shook the old man's hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. He didn't need to say thank you. I understood the language of survival. As for the demolition of the past, the rubble has finally been cleared. Rachel Vance called me last week with the final update on the legal proceedings. Leonard accepted a plea deal to avoid a 20-year sentence. He pleaded guilty to insurance fraud and elder abuse in exchange for 12 years in a federal penitentiary. He will be eligible for parole when he is 78 years old. He will come out an old man with no assets, no reputation, and no family. He built his life on sand, and the tide finally came in. And Beatrice. The last I heard, the Queen of Boca Raton was working double shifts at a diner near the interstate to pay off her credit card debt. I stopped by there once not to mock her, but just to see if it was true. I sat in a booth in the corner, ordered a coffee, and watched her work. She looked tired. She looked humbled. She didn't see me, and I didn't make my presence known. I left a $100 tip on the table and walked away. It wasn't charity. It was severance pay. Tonight the house is quiet again. I am sitting at my drafting table sketching a new design for a garden gazebo Mom wants in the backyard. She says she wants a place to watch the birds without the sun in her eyes. I am calculating the wind load and the angle of the roof with the same precision I used for suspension bridges. Some people say that once a structure is broken, it is never as strong as it was before. As an engineer, I can tell you that is a lie. If you clear the rot, pour fresh concrete, and reinforce the stress points, the new structure can withstand storms that would have leveled the old one. I put down my pencil and look out the window. Mom is there pointing at a cardinal in the tree, laughing at something the nurse said. The foundation is solid. The cracks are sealed. The building is safe. And for the first time in 40 years, I can finally put down my tools and rest. This story is a brutal reminder that the title of family is earned, not inherited. We often cling to toxic relationships because we share DNA, believing that blood obligates us to tolerate abuse, manipulation, and betrayal. But true family is defined by action, by care, and by loyalty. Garrison showed us that standing up for the vulnerable sometimes means cutting ties with those who harm them, even if they are your own flesh and blood. Protecting your peace and the dignity of your loved ones is the highest form of duty. Never set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially if they are the ones holding the match. If this story moved you, or if you have ever had to make a tough choice to protect a loved one, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, at what point would you have drawn the line if you were in Gary's shoes? I read every single comment. Thank you for listening. And until the next story, stay safe and keep your foundations strong.